The dust kicked up around her worn boots as Penelope Katherine stood on the wooden platform. Her grandmother's frail hand clutched tightly in hers, while the auctioneer's voice boomed across the crowd of men gathered in the scorching heat of Manassa, Colorado, in the summer of 1882. "Now here we got something real special, gentlemen," the auctioneer called out, wiping sweat from his brow with a dirty handkerchief. "Young woman, strong and capable, comes with her grandmother. Both owned debts to the railroad company, and now those debts need paying. What am I bid?" Penelope felt her grandmother, Margaret, trembling beside her. The old woman was 72, her white hair tucked beneath a faded bonnet, her face weathered from years of hard living on the frontier. Penelope herself was 21, her dark hair tied back with a strip of cloth, her blue eyes scanning the crowd with barely concealed fury and fear. They had come to Colorado 3 years ago after her grandfather died, hoping to start fresh. Instead, they had fallen into debt when the small boarding house they ran burned down last winter. The railroad company had loaned them money to rebuild, but when they could not make the payments, everything changed. Now here they stood, like cattle being sold to the highest bidder, their freedom gone in an instant. $50, called a rough-looking man with tobacco-stained teeth. $50 for both. Come now, gentlemen, look at that young woman. Strong back, good for cooking, cleaning, whatever work needs doing, the auctioneer pressed. Penelope felt sick. Her grandmother swayed slightly, and Penelope wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Stay strong, Grandma," she whispered. "We will get through this." 75, another voice called. The bidding continued, each number feeling like another nail in the coffin of their dignity. Penelope had heard stories of debt auctions, where people were essentially sold into indentured servitude until their debts were paid. She had never imagined it would happen to them. Then a voice cut through the crowd, strong and clear. $500. The crowd went silent. Penelope looked toward the voice and saw a tall man stepping forward. He wore a dusty brown hat, a clean shirt despite the heat, and had a commanding presence that made the other men step aside. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, with strong features, sun-bronzed skin, and intense hazel eyes that met hers across the platform. 500. The auctioneer sputtered. "Well now, that is a bid indeed. Anyone care to go higher?" the crowd murmured, but no one spoke up. $500 was more money than most of these men saw in 6 months. Going once, going twice, sold to Holden Quincy of the Double Q Ranch. The man, Holden, stepped up to the platform and handed over a stack of bills to the auctioneer, who counted them greedily. Penelope watched this transaction, her heart pounding. What kind of man would pay such a sum? What would he expect in return? Holden turned to face them, and his expression softened slightly. "Come on down from there," he said, his voice gentler than she expected. "Let us get you both out of this sun." Penelope helped her grandmother down the steps, and they stood before their new owner, uncertain and afraid. Up close, she could see that Holden had kind eyes, despite the weathered look of a man who spent his days working under the harsh Colorado sun. He was perhaps 26 or 27, tall and broad-shouldered, with calloused hands that spoke of hard work. "I am Holden Quincy," he said, tipping his hat to them. "What are your names?" "Penelope Katherine," she said, lifting her chin with what dignity she could muster. "This is my grandmother, Margaret. Pleased to meet you both, though I wish it were under better circumstances," Holden said. He gestured toward a wagon hitched to 2 horses at the edge of the town square. "My ranch is about an hour's ride from here. We should get moving before the worst heat of the day sets in." Penelope helped her grandmother into the back of the wagon, where there was hay and some blankets. She climbed up beside her, and Holden took the driver's seat, clicking his tongue to get the horses moving. As they left Manassa behind, Penelope studied their new master. He sat straight-backed, confident in his handling of the horses, and he had placed a canteen of water within their reach without being asked. These small gestures confused her. Men who bought people at auction were not usually considerate. "Mr. Quincy," she began, her voice stronger than she felt, "what exactly do you expect from us?" Holden glanced back at her, his eyes unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. "I expect you to help run my household. I have a ranch, and it is more work than one man can handle alone. I need someone to cook, keep the house, help with the garden. Your grandmother can do whatever she is able, no more than that." "And if we refuse?" Penelope asked, knowing the answer but needing to hear it. "Then you will be in breach of the legal agreement, and you would be sent back to face the railroad company's justice, which I imagine would not be pleasant," Holden said matter-of-factly. "But I am not a cruel man, Miss Katherine. You will have a roof over your head, food to eat, and fair treatment. That is my word." Margaret spoke up for the first time, her voice thin but steady. "Why did you pay so much for us? You could have gotten someone for half that price." Holden was quiet for a moment, the only sound the creaking of the wagon wheels and the clip-clop of hooves. "I do not believe in separating families," he finally said. "When I heard the auctioneer say you came together, I saw those other men looking at just the young woman, ready to split you apart without a second thought. That did not sit right with me. Family stays together under my roof. That is how I was raised, and that is how I live." Something in his tone made Penelope believe him, though she remained wary. They rode in silence for a while, the landscape rolling past them in shades of brown and gold, with mountains rising in the distance. Colorado was beautiful and harsh all at once, much like life itself out here. The ranch came into view as they crested a hill. It was a substantial property with a two-story house painted white, a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals holding horses and cattle. Penelope felt a surge of relief at the sight. Whatever else Holden Quincy might be, he was clearly a successful rancher, which meant they would likely not starve. Holden pulled the wagon up to the house and helped Margaret down with surprising gentleness, offering his arm for support. "Let me show you inside," he said. The house was well built and clean, though it clearly lacked a woman's touch. The furniture was practical but sparse, and dust covered most surfaces. Holden led them through the main room with its large fireplace, past a dining area with a long wooden table, and into the kitchen, which was spacious with a good stove and plenty of storage. "There are 3 bedrooms upstairs," Holden said. "You and your grandmother can take the 2 on the east side. They get good morning light. My room is on the west. There is also a bathing room with a copper tub. The pump outside brings water from the well." Penelope looked around, taking it all in. "This is a fine house, Mr. Quincy." "You built it yourself." "My father built it," Holden said, a shadow crossing his face. "He and my mother started this ranch 20 years ago. They both passed 3 years back. Fever took them within a week of each other. I have been running it alone since then." "I am sorry for your loss," Margaret said softly. Holden nodded his thanks. "I will show you to your room so you can rest. We can discuss your duties tomorrow. For now, just settle in." He led them upstairs, and Penelope was surprised to find the rooms were indeed pleasant, with real beds and clean linens, windows with curtains, and even a small dresser in each room. This was far better than she had dared hope. After Holden left them, Penelope helped her grandmother lie down to rest, then went to the window of her own room and looked out over the ranch. Men were working in the distance, tending to cattle and horses. This was to be her life now, at least until the debt was paid. How long would that take? Years, probably. She felt tears prick her eyes but refused to let them fall. She had to be strong for her grandmother. They were alive, they were together, and they had shelter. That was more than many people had. A knock at her door made her turn. Holden stood there, hat in hand. "I forgot to mention, there is a general store account in town under the ranch name. If you need anything for yourself or your grandmother, you can purchase it there. I will settle the account monthly." Penelope stared at him. "You are allowing us credit." "You are part of my household now," Holden said simply. "And you cannot do your work without the proper supplies and clothing. Just be reasonable about it." "I do not understand you, Mr. Quincy," Penelope said, her frustration spilling over. "You bought us like cattle, but you treat us like guests. Which is it?" Holden stepped into the room, and Penelope tensed, but he merely moved to look out the window she had been gazing through. "I did not want to buy you," he said quietly. "But I could not stand there and watch you be sold to men who would have worked you to death or worse. I could not watch your grandmother be torn from you. So yes, I bought you, because that was the only way to protect you. But I will not treat you as property. You are human beings deserving of dignity and respect." Penelope felt her anger deflate, replaced by confusion and something else she could not quite name. "Why do you care what happens to strangers?" "Because strangers are just friends you have not met yet," Holden said, a small smile crossing his face. "My mother used to say that. She was always taking in people who needed help, much to my father's exasperation, but he loved her for it anyway." "She sounds like a good woman," Penelope said. "The best," Holden agreed. He put his hat back on and headed for the door. "Dinner is usually at 7. I have been making do with simple fare, but I will cook tonight so you can rest. Tomorrow, if you are feeling up to it, you can take over the kitchen." After he left, Penelope sat on her bed, her mind whirling. Holden Quincy was not what she had expected. He was educated, kind, and seemed genuinely concerned for their welfare. But he had still bought them, still owned their labor, still held their freedom in his hands. The next morning, Penelope woke early and found Holden already up making coffee in the kitchen. He looked surprised to see her. "You should have slept longer," he said. "You had a hard day yesterday." "I am used to waking early," Penelope replied. "Let me make breakfast." She shooed him out of the kitchen and set to work, finding eggs, bacon, and potatoes in the larder. As she cooked, she began to feel more like herself. This was familiar work, comfortable work. She could do this. When breakfast was ready, she called Holden and her grandmother to the table. Margaret looked better after a night's sleep, some color returning to her pale cheeks. They ate in relative silence, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. "This is excellent," Holden said, finishing his eggs. "You are a fine cook, Miss Katherine." "Penelope is fine," she said. "If we are to live under the same roof, formality seems unnecessary." "Then you should call me Holden," he replied. "And your grandmother—" "You may call me Margaret, young man," the old woman said with a hint of her old spirit showing through. Holden grinned. "Margaret it is." Over the next few weeks, they fell into a routine. Penelope took over the running of the household, cooking, cleaning, and managing the garden. Margaret helped where she could, mending clothes and shelling peas on the porch. Holden worked the ranch from dawn to dusk, coming in only for meals and sleep. Penelope found herself watching him more than she intended. He was a good man. She could see that clearly now. He was patient with his ranch hands, fair in his dealings, and never once made her feel uncomfortable or threatened. He kept his distance, respectful of her space, but she caught him watching her sometimes too, quickly looking away when their eyes met. One evening, about a month after their arrival, a storm rolled in fast and furious. Penelope was bringing in laundry from the line when the rain started, and she ran for the house, arms full of sheets. She burst through the door, laughing at her own drenched state, and found Holden standing there, smiling at her. "You are soaked through," he said, taking the laundry from her arms. "I did not expect it to come on so quickly," Penelope said, pushing wet hair from her face. "Colorado weather," Holden said. "It changes faster than a horse can run." Thunder cracked overhead and the house shook slightly. Margaret appeared from the sitting room looking worried. "That is quite a storm." "The house has weathered worse," Holden assured her. "We are safe here." They spent the evening together by the fire, listening to the storm rage outside. Holden told them stories about growing up on the ranch, about his parents, and the early days when Colorado was even wilder than it was now. Penelope found herself drawn to his voice, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about his family. "What about you?" Holden asked. "What brought you and your grandmother to Colorado?" Penelope told him about her grandfather, about their hopes for a new life, about the fire that destroyed everything. She found herself opening up in a way she had not expected, feeling safe enough to share her fears and disappointments. "You have had a hard road," Holden said softly when she finished, "but you are strong. Anyone can see that." "I had to be strong," Penelope said. "For Grandma, strength is not a burden you should have to carry alone," Holden replied. Their eyes met across the firelight, and Penelope felt something shift between them, something warm and promising. She looked away first, unsure what to do with these feelings that were developing. As summer turned to fall, the ranch stayed busy with preparing for winter. Holden hired extra hands for the harvest and roundup, and Penelope found herself cooking for a dozen hungry men every day. She did not mind the work. It kept her busy and gave her purpose. One afternoon, while Penelope was hanging laundry, one of the newer ranch hands, a rough-looking man named Jake, approached her. "You sure are pretty when you are working," he said, standing too close. Penelope stepped back. "Thank you, but I have work to finish." "Come now, do not be unfriendly," Jake said, reaching for her arm. "The lady said she has work to do." Holden's voice cut through the air like a whip. He stood near the barn, his posture tense. "And you have cattle to tend to, Jake." Jake backed off immediately. "Sorry, boss." "Did not mean any harm. See that you remember that," Holden said coldly. After Jake left, Holden approached Penelope. "Are you all right? Did he hurt you?" "No, I am fine," Penelope said, though her hands were shaking slightly. "Thank you for intervening." "I should have been clearer with the men from the start," Holden said, anger still evident in his voice. "You and your grandmother are under my protection. No one lays a hand on you. I will make sure everyone understands that." "You are very protective," Penelope observed. "You are part of my household," Holden said, then paused. "And you have become important to me, both of you." Penelope felt her heart skip. "Important?" Holden looked at her intently. "Penelope, I know you are here because of circumstances neither of us chose. But over these past months, I have come to admire you greatly. Your strength, your kindness, your spirit. I look forward to seeing you every morning, and the house feels empty when you are not in it." "Holden," Penelope breathed, not sure what to say. "I am not asking anything of you," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know how I feel. You do not have to respond or feel the same way. Nothing has to change." But everything had already changed. Penelope had been fighting her own growing feelings for weeks, telling herself it was foolish to care for the man who owned her debt. But hearing him speak so openly made her realize her feelings were deeper than she had admitted. "What if I do feel the same way?" she asked quietly. Holden's eyes widened. "Do you?" "I think I do," Penelope admitted. "But I do not know how that can work given our situation. You are my employer, my legal guardian in a way. How can anything between us be real when the foundation is so unequal?" Holden took off his hat, running a hand through his hair in frustration. You are right. I have thought about that too, which is why I went to town yesterday and did something I should have done months ago. He pulled a paper from his pocket and handed it to her. Penelope unfolded it and read, her eyes widening in shock. It was a legal document declaring the debt satisfied in full, signed by Holden and witnessed by the town lawyer. You are free, Holden said. Both you and your grandmother. You can leave right now if you want, or you can stay and work for wages, but you are not bound to me anymore. Tears filled Penelope's eyes. You paid off our debt, all of it. The $500 I paid at the auction was credited toward it, and I paid the rest yesterday. I should have done it sooner, but I was afraid if I freed you, you would leave, and I have grown rather fond of having you here. He gave a rueful smile. Selfish of me, I know. Penelope threw her arms around him without thinking, the paper clutched in her hand. Holden stood rigid for a moment, then slowly wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. Thank you, she whispered against his chest. Thank you for giving us our freedom. You always deserved it, Holden said into her hair. I just made it official. They stood like that for a long moment, and when Penelope finally pulled back, she looked up at him. I do not want to leave. You do not. No, she said firmly. This has become home. You have become important to me too, Holden, more than I thought possible. A smile spread across Holden's face, transforming it with joy. Then stay. Not as someone working off a debt, but as someone who chooses to be here. Let me court you properly, Penelope. Let me show you what life could be like if you gave us a chance. I would like that, Penelope said, her own smile matching his. That evening they told Margaret the news about the debt being paid. The old woman wept with relief and joy, hugging Holden tightly. You are a good man, Holden Quincy. Your parents raised you right. I am just doing what anyone should do, Holden said humbly. No, Margaret said firmly. You are doing what few people would do. You saw people in need and you helped them, expecting nothing in return. That is rare and precious. Over the following weeks, Holden courted Penelope with old-fashioned sweetness. He brought her wildflowers from the meadow, took her riding across the ranch at sunset, and sat with her on the porch in the evenings talking about everything and nothing. He was respectful, never pushing for more than she was ready to give, and Penelope found herself falling deeper in love with him every day. The ranch hands noticed the change and treated Penelope with even more respect, seeing she was no longer just the housekeeper but the boss's sweetheart. The rough hand, Jake, had been let go after the incident, and the other men were good, honest workers who treated both Penelope and Margaret kindly. Winter came early that year, bringing snow that blanketed the ranch in white. Penelope had never seen anything so beautiful. She stood at the kitchen window one morning watching the snow fall when Holden came up behind her. Beautiful, is it not? He said softly. It is like a dream, Penelope replied. I have been thinking, Holden said, and she heard the nervousness in his voice. About us, about the future. Penelope turned to face him. What about it? Holden took her hands in his. I love you, Penelope. I think I started falling in love with you the moment I saw you standing on that platform, fierce and protective of your grandmother. You have brought life back to this house, back to me. I was just existing before you came, but now I feel like I am truly living again. Tears gathered in Penelope's eyes. I love you too, Holden. I fought it at first because I was scared, but I cannot fight it anymore. You have shown me what a good man is, what real love looks like. Then marry me, Holden said. Be my wife, my partner in all things. Let us build a life together, a real family. Yes, Penelope said without hesitation. Yes, I will marry you. Holden pulled her into his arms and kissed her for the first time, a sweet, gentle kiss that promised a lifetime of love. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling through tears. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Manassa. with Margaret as witness and several of the ranch hands in attendance. The Reverend performed a simple but heartfelt ceremony, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, Holden kissed his bride with such tenderness that several people in the pews wiped away tears. The winter passed in a blur of happiness. Penelope reveled in her new role as Holden's wife, and he was attentive and loving, always making sure she knew how much she meant to him. They worked together running the ranch, making decisions as partners, and their respect and love for each other only grew stronger. Margaret thrived under their care, her health improving with the good food and warm shelter. She spent her days knitting and sewing, making beautiful quilts and clothes for the household. She often told Penelope how happy she was to see her granddaughter so loved and cherished. One evening in early spring, Penelope realized she had not had her monthly bleeding and felt a flutter of excitement mixed with nervousness. She waited another week to be sure, then shared the news with Holden. "I am going to have a baby," she said simply as they sat together after dinner. Holden stared at her, then whooped with joy, picking her up and spinning her around before carefully setting her down. "A baby, truly, truly," Penelope laughed. "Are you happy?" "Happy, I am overjoyed." Holden kissed her soundly. "We are going to be parents. You are giving me a family, Penelope." "I cannot express what that means to me." Margaret was equally thrilled at the news, immediately starting work on baby clothes and blankets. The months passed quickly as they prepared for the new arrival. Holden was protective to the point of being overbearing, not wanting Penelope to do any heavy work, but she loved him for his concern. On a warm October evening in 1883, their son was born. He came into the world with a lusty cry, healthy and strong. Holden held his son with trembling hands, tears streaming down his face as he looked at Penelope with absolute wonder. "He is perfect," Holden whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you for this gift." "What should we name him?" Penelope asked, exhausted but happy. "I was thinking William," Holden said. "After my father. William James Quincy. What do you think?" "I think it is perfect," Penelope said. William, or Billy as they came to call him, was a happy baby who brought even more joy to the household. Margaret doted on her great-grandson, and Holden was a devoted father, often found rocking the baby to sleep or talking to him about the ranch and horses, even though Billy was too young to understand. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and love. When Billy was 2, Penelope gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Robert and Sarah. The house was full of noise and laughter, children's voices echoing through the rooms that had once been so quiet. Holden expanded the ranch, buying additional land and building up one of the finest cattle operations in the region. But he never lost sight of what was truly important, always making time for his wife and children, always putting family first. Margaret lived to see all 3 grandchildren grow into bright, lively youngsters. She passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 79, content in the knowledge that Penelope was loved and protected, that the family was thriving. They buried her on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a large cottonwood tree she had loved to sit beneath. Penelope grieved but found comfort in her memories, and in the family her grandmother had lived to see flourish. She often took the children to visit the grave, telling them stories about their great-grandmother and the long journey that had brought them all to this place. As the children grew, the ranch continued to prosper. Billy showed his father's talent with horses and cattle. Robert had a head for numbers and helped manage the business side. And Sarah was fierce and independent, insisting on learning everything her brothers learned and then some. One evening, when Billy was 15, Robert and Sarah 13, the family sat together on the porch after dinner. Holden and Penelope sat on the swing, his arm around her shoulders while the children sprawled on the steps. "Father," Billy said, "you and Mother never really told us the full story of how you met. We know it was at an auction, but that is all." Holden and Penelope exchanged glances. They had sheltered their children from the harsher details, but perhaps it was time they knew the truth. "It is not a pleasant story," Penelope began, "but it has a good ending." She told them about the debt, about standing on that platform in fear, about Holden stepping forward and paying a fortune for both her and her great-grandmother. She explained about the freedom he had given them, the choice he had offered. "Family stays together under my roof," Holden said, repeating the words he had spoken all those years ago. "That was true then, and it is true now. No one gets left behind, no one gets forgotten. We take care of our own." "You saved them," Sarah said, looking at her father with new admiration. "I did what was right," Holden said simply. "And I got far more than I gave. Your mother and grandmother brought life back to this house to me. Everything good in my life stems from that day." "Everything good in my life came from your father's kindness and love," Penelope added, squeezing Holden's hand. The children were quiet, absorbing this new understanding of their parents' history. Finally, Billy spoke. "I hope I can be half the man you are, Father." "You already are," Holden said with pride. "All three of you are everything your mother and I could have hoped for." More years passed, and the children grew into fine young adults. Billy married a schoolteacher from Denver and brought her to the ranch, building a house on the property for his own growing family. Robert went to college and came back with a degree in business, helping to modernize the ranch operations. Sarah shocked everyone by becoming a lawyer, one of the first women to practice law in Colorado, and she used her position to help other women in difficult circumstances. Holden and Penelope grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They became grandparents, then great-grandparents, watching their family tree spread and flourish. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Holden took Penelope back to the place where they had first met in Manassa. The town had changed, grown more civilized, and the place where debt auctions had once been held was now a park. "Hard to believe it has been 30 years, Holden said, looking around. "The best 30 years of my life," Penelope replied, leaning into him. "Mine too," Holden agreed. "I meant what I said that day, you know, about family staying together. You and your grandmother were strangers to me, but I could not let you be separated. I could not let you be hurt." "And in saving us, you saved yourself," Penelope said softly. "You were alone, Holden. You needed us as much as we needed you." "I did," he admitted. "I just did not know it until I saw you." They stood together in the park, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, who had built a life and a legacy on a foundation of kindness and love. "Do you ever regret it?" Penelope asked. "Paying so much, taking on so much responsibility." Holden turned to face her, cupping her face in his weathered hands. "Not for one single moment. You are the best decision I ever made. Loving you has been the greatest adventure of my life." "I love you, Holden Quincy," Penelope said, tears in her eyes. "And I love you, Penelope Quincy," he replied, kissing her sweetly. They returned to the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The house was lit up with lights, and they could hear laughter and voices inside. The family had gathered for the anniversary celebration, all their children and grandchildren waiting to honor them. As they walked into the house together, hand in hand, Penelope felt a profound sense of gratitude. From that terrible day on the auction platform, a beautiful life had grown. Fear and uncertainty had transformed into love and security. A debt had become a blessing. That night, surrounded by family, Holden stood and raised his glass. "I want to make a toast," he said, and the room quieted. 30 years ago, I met the woman who would change my life forever. I thought I was saving her, but the truth is, she saved me. Penelope brought light into my darkness, love into my loneliness, and family into an empty house. To my wife, my partner, my best friend, I love you more today than I did 30 years ago, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Everyone raised their glasses, voices joining in agreement. Penelope stood and wrapped her arms around her husband, holding him close as their family cheered. The years continued to roll by like the seasons, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Holden and Penelope faced them all together, their bond unbreakable. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, celebrated births and mourned deaths, always standing side by side. When Holden turned 72, the same age Margaret had been when they first came to the ranch, he sat with Penelope on the porch, watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard. "Do you remember what I said that first day?" he asked. "You said many things," Penelope replied with a smile. "I said family stays together under my roof," Holden reminded her. "I meant it then and I mean it now. This ranch, this family, everything we built, it is all because we stayed together. Because we chose love over fear, hope over despair. We made something beautiful," Penelope agreed. "Out of something that started so ugly, we made something beautiful." Holden took her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally after so many years. "I would do it all again, you know. Every moment, every challenge, as long as it led me back to you. And I would choose you every single time," Penelope said. "You gave me freedom when you did not have to. You gave me love when I did not expect it. You gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over their land, over the empire of love they had built together. The house behind them was full of life, full of the family that had started with a cowboy who believed families should stay together, and a young woman who had been brave enough to trust him. Inside, their children and grandchildren moved about, preparing dinner, telling stories, living the lives that Holden and Penelope's love had made possible. The kitchen was warm with the smell of baking bread. The sound of laughter echoed through the halls, and love filled every corner of the house that had once been so empty and quiet. As darkness fell and the stars began to appear, Holden and Penelope finally went inside, welcomed by the warmth and noise of their family. They had dinner together, all of them crowded around the big table that had seen so many meals, so many celebrations, so many ordinary moments that made up a life well lived. Later that night, lying in bed with Penelope in his arms, Holden felt a deep contentment. He had lived a good life, a meaningful life. He had taken a chance on love when it presented itself in the most unlikely way, and it had paid off beyond his wildest imaginings. "Are you awake?" Penelope whispered in the darkness. "Yes," Holden replied. "I was just thinking about that day, the auction day," she said. "I was so frightened. I thought my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning." "The best things often come from the hardest moments," Holden said. "We just have to be brave enough to see the opportunity in the struggle." "You were my opportunity," Penelope said. "My second chance." "And you were mine," Holden replied. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, the way they had slept for 35 years, the way they would sleep for all the years they had left. The Double Q Ranch continued to thrive under the combined management of their children. Billy ran the cattle operation, Robert handled the finances and expansion, and Sarah ensured that all their business dealings were legal and fair, having learned from her father's example that success built on integrity lasted longer than success built on exploitation. When Holden turned 75, the whole family gathered for a massive celebration. People came from all over Colorado, friends and business associates, neighbors and townspeople. Holden was known throughout the region not just for his successful ranch, but for his fairness and kindness. He had helped many families over the years, offering work when they needed it, extending credit when times were hard, never forgetting what it felt like to see people in desperate circumstances. During the party, Billy stood to speak about his father. "My father taught me many things," he said, his voice strong and clear. "He taught me how to rope a calf, how to break a horse, how to read the weather. But the most important thing he taught me was how to treat people. He showed me that success means nothing if you achieve it by stepping on others. That family is not just blood, it is the people you choose to love and protect. And that true strength lies in kindness, not cruelty." Holden wiped tears from his eyes as his son spoke, and Penelope squeezed his hand. They had raised their children well, instilled in them values that would be passed down through generations. Sarah spoke next, her lawyer's eloquence evident. "My father did something extraordinary 36 years ago. He saw two women about to be separated and sold to the highest bidder, and he could not let it happen. He paid a fortune to keep a family together, asking nothing in return. That single act of compassion changed the trajectory of multiple lives. My mother, my great-grandmother, my brothers, me, all my nieces and nephews, none of us would be here without that decision. Father, you are our hero and we love you." Robert was last, and he kept it simple. "To the best father a man could ask for, thank you for showing us what it means to be good." "We love you, Dad." Holden stood, overwhelmed by emotion, and looked at his family gathered around him. "I am the one who should be thanking all of you," he said. "You have given my life meaning and purpose. Every day with you has been a gift. And to my wife, my Penelope, you are the reason for all of this. You said yes to a future with me when you could have run as soon as you were free. You chose me, and that choice has been the foundation of everything good in my life. I love you beyond words." The party continued late into the night, with music and dancing, food and laughter. Holden and Penelope danced together as they had done countless times over the years, moving slowly to a waltz, lost in their own world. "Happy?" Penelope asked. "Completely," Holden replied. "Are you?" "More than I ever dreamed possible," Penelope said. "You kept your word, Holden. You said family stays together under your roof, and you have made that true for 36 years. You have built something lasting and beautiful." "We built it together," Holden corrected. "Every step of the way, we were partners." As they swayed to the music, surrounded by the family their love had created, both reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them here. From an auction platform in the heat of summer to this moment of celebration and joy, they had walked together through all life had thrown at them. The years after that were gentle and kind. Holden and Penelope gradually stepped back from the daily operations of the ranch, content to let their children run things while they enjoyed their twilight years together. They took walks every day, sat on the porch every evening, and continued to share the deep companionship that had sustained them for so long. When Holden was 79 and Penelope 75, they celebrated their 45th wedding anniversary. The family gathered again, though it was a quieter affair this time. Holden's health had begun to fail, and while his mind was still sharp, his body was wearing out. 45 years, Penelope said as they sat together in their room after the celebration. "Who would have thought that frightened girl and the cowboy who saved her would build such a life?" "I always knew," Holden said with a smile. "From the moment I saw you, I knew you were special. I knew you were worth fighting for." "You did not just fight for me, you fought with me," Penelope said. "Side by side through everything." "That is what partners do," Holden replied. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Penelope, I need you to promise me something." Anything, she said, worry creeping into her voice. When I am gone, I need you to keep living, really living. Do not shut yourself away. Stay with the family, watch the great-grandchildren grow, continue to be the heart of this family. Can you promise me that? Tears streamed down Penelope's face. Do not talk like that. You are not going anywhere. We both know my time is coming, Holden said gently, and that is all right. I have lived a full, beautiful life, but I need to know you will be okay. I will never be okay without you, Penelope said, her voice breaking. Yes, you will, Holden said with certainty. You are the strongest person I know. You will grieve, and that is good, but then you will continue on because that is what you do. You survive, you thrive, you love. Promise me. I promise, Penelope whispered, though the words tore at her heart. Holden pulled her close, and they held each other, knowing their time was growing short but grateful for every moment they still had. 2 months later, on a crisp November morning, Holden passed away peacefully in his sleep with Penelope beside him. The family gathered to mourn, and the whole town of Manassa turned out for his funeral. He was remembered as a good man, a fair businessman, a devoted husband and father, and someone who had made the world a little bit better by being in it. Penelope grieved deeply, but she kept her promise. She remained with the family, staying in the house she and Holden had shared, surrounded by children and grandchildren who loved her. She told them stories about Holden, keeping his memory alive, ensuring that the lessons he had taught would continue through the generations. She lived another 12 years, watching more great-grandchildren be born, seeing the ranch continue to prosper, and knowing that the legacy she and Holden had built together was secure. She never remarried, content with the memories of her great love. On a warm spring day, just after her 87th birthday, Penelope Katherine Quincy passed away in her sleep, a peaceful smile on her face. The family gathered once more, laying her to rest beside Holden on the hill overlooking the ranch, under the cottonwood tree where Margaret was also buried. At the funeral, Billy, now in his 60s himself, spoke about his mother. She was a woman of incredible strength and grace, he said. She faced hardship and fear, but she never let it break her. She loved deeply and completely, and she taught us all what it means to be family. She and Father built something that will last long after we are all gone, a legacy of love and kindness that will echo through time. And it did. The Double Q Ranch remained in the Quincy family for generations, each new generation hearing the story of how it all began. The story of a young woman and her grandmother on an auction platform, and a cowboy who believed that family stays together under his roof. The story of how love can bloom in the darkest circumstances, and how one act of kindness can change the world. The house still stands on that hill in Colorado, weathered but strong, full of the descendants of Holden and Penelope. And on quiet evenings, when the family gathers on the porch to watch the sunset, they sometimes feel a presence, a warmth that reminds them they are never alone. The love that Holden and Penelope built still surrounds them, protecting them, guiding them, reminding them that family stays together, always and forever. In the great room of the house, above the fireplace, hangs a portrait of Holden and Penelope painted on their 20th wedding anniversary. They are younger in the painting, but their eyes hold the wisdom of all they had already endured together. Visitors to the ranch always comment on the painting, on the love evident in the way they look at each other, on the sense of partnership and devotion that the artist captured so perfectly. And the current Quincy family members always smile and say, "That is the foundation of everything you see here." Two people who chose love over fear, who built something beautiful out of something ugly, who never forgot that family is the most important thing. That is our legacy, and we honor it every day. The story of Holden and Penelope Quincy became a legend in that part of Colorado, a tale told to remind people that goodness still exists in the world, that love can triumph over circumstance, and that one person's choice to do the right thing can ripple out across generations, creating waves of positive change that never truly end. And somewhere in whatever comes after this life, Holden and Penelope Quincy are together still, watching over the family they created, the love they nurtured, and the legacy that will never die. Because family stays together, under any roof in any realm for all eternity. That is the promise Holden made on a hot summer day in 1882, and it is a promise that was kept, is being kept, and will always be kept as long as the name Quincy echoes across the Colorado plains.